Greetings, friends and future friends. Today I want to show you some presets, some rigs I built in the Headrush Pedal Board. These three rigs I'm going to show you today are the rigs I use for heavy metal or rock. One's a solo rig, and the other two are rhythm rigs. One of a new modern metal sound, and one of an 80s metal sound with that chorusing effect. So let me show you how I built these things.
Okay, this is preset RJM-L0B. And as I've said before in previous videos with the Headrush pedal board or any other pedal board that you're using, you can save presets to each guitar and to each pickup. So in other words, this is L0B, which tells me that it's a lead channel or a lead rig. 0 is flash, because my three Ibanez S's, the blonde is flash, the blue is midnight, and the red, of course, is red. So I know that this is going to 0, which is flash. Now, if that was a 1, that would be going to midnight, and if that was a 2, it would be going to red. So that's just giving you something to think about. When you do these presets, you can label them. Now, the Headrush pedal board has 7 digits per element on the deck. So this will actually show up on the deck of the pedal board. But I wanted to zoom into the screen to give you a closer look at these rigs that I designed here. So first of all, let's look at the in. And the in is basically setting the noise parameter, the threshold of the noise gate. And pretty much I set this up and it goes to all my rigs, all my guitars. So all my S's are set up this way, and I found that this is a good setup for all my guitars. So gain is 0, threshold is minus 63.0, gate response is 12 milliseconds, 0, 100 dB for the filter, and of course there's no USB going out of this, so we're not using that. So let's get back out of that. Let's look at the rig. Volume, this is going to be pretty much the same on all the rigs too. It's just setting up the volume where it's going to be set to, basically using the A pedal, which is the pedal on the pedal board itself. So let's get into this rig. So first we're going to go into distortion, which is an MX distortion. And I have that set to 43 distortion and a 52% output. And I use that basically as a drive. So the basic lead will be with this distortion, which I have 0 drive, 43 is tone, and 37% level. That's basically driving the amp. And then I use the MX distortion, if I turn it on and turn it off, to give me that extra drive if I need it for a sustained note. But basically the lead guitar will be this sound right here. Then we'll go to the amps. Again, what is cool about this, once you play with this, is you can build rigs. And now look, I have all these listings of amps. So basically I'm using the RJM M2 lead, which we know what that amp is, the M5s, M3, M2s. And what I'm doing here is using the M2 lead and of course labeling it to that guitar. And I'm using 32% drive, 77% master, 0 presence, 27% treble, 90 mid-range, and 14 on bass. I have the bright turned off and the volume at 82. Back. Now, this other amp is going to be the same thing, so we don't really need to go to that. But it's basically being mirrored. And again, remember, the amp on top, this amp, is actually going out to the left, and this amp is going out to the right. Parametric EQ is at 0.9 dB. Low mids is at 1.2 plus 0 in the mids, and then the high mid is at 0.9, highs at 1.2, and the gain is 0. So there's a couple of things to look at too here. What I've done is I've taken and actually put the graphics EQ, the flanger, the stereo doubler, the pitch delay, and the 11 reverb, short reverb, inside the loop. So these are all going before the speakers. So this graphic EQ is actually like it's coming out of the loop of the guitar amp and going into the effects and then back into the amp before it goes to the speakers. So I added this flanger, which sounded weird, but it really works great. So the flanger's added, and that's a 0.63 hertz, depth 29, feedback -29, pre-delay 5.2 milliseconds, and stereo 180 degrees, and the sync is off. The stereo doubler is intensity is 52%, milliseconds 14 milliseconds, and the width is 0. The pitch delay is 3 milliseconds, a 29% mix, 0 feedback. I have it at level 1 dB, and I detuned it by 3%, and the low cutoff is at 20 hertz, and the high cutoff is at 10,000. So what I did doing that, you can take, and again, I have the sync turned off and the tails turned off. Now, one thing here about this percentage cutoff. So now, anything above 10,000 hertz will not have that effect put on. So I don't want to put pitch delay to something like a noise of a pick or any kind of real high string noise. So it gives you, kind of cuts that real high stuff off a little bit in the pitch delay. The stuff will go through it, but it just cuts that off. The tails also. I didn't want any tails, so I didn't want any. So once, there's no going to be a prolonged reverb or prolonged feedback of that delay. It's going to be dead right there. It's going to just basically almost act like a doubler in a way. And then we go to 11. Now this 11 reverb, I got it at 12%, 100% tone, 0% delay, pre-delay, a 12% mix, and again, the tails are off on that. Because again, I wanted this reverb to act more as a doubler too. You'll see that the tails are off and that, there's no pre-delay and the tone is going through 100%. Which, if we go to the end reverb, you're going to see that I have it as a longer reverb. This reverb here, when I turn it on and off, gives you that longer reverb for a longer sustain. That way, if you wanted to sustain a note and you wanted that heavy reverb and you're only playing single notes, that would be the reverb to have on there, and turn this reverb off. Now, if you're playing something quick and fast, the extended reverb would just clutter everything up. So that's why we keep the short reverb on there. Works really nice. And as my cabinets go, we're going with the RJM C30 watt, which is the 4x12 classic 30 watt speaker. Now what I'm doing is using a condenser 87 mic. So what I've done here is created my preset, RJM C30 watt 87. And as you see again, I have these all set, so I could actually change that cabinet, and maybe I wanted to put the 414 in there. You could do that. Now you'll see everything stayed the same, but now the microphone has changed. And again, if you go on there, and then here's access. Now what I usually do is keep everything at 0 in the cabinets, because if I really want to make a big change on this cabinet, you can change microphones, because then I can come down here and add all these different microphones. You have all these different microphones you could add to that. And basically that's it. Now the output on this, the width rig, you want to keep that at 100%, because that way all the effects on that rig will be used. There will be no compression of the width of the rig, and everything's centered. If you have something on this rig that will go wide, keeping it wide like that will go wide. And you can see I didn't add any volume to it. Now, if you're in a live situation and you wanted to change the volume to make this a little bit louder than your other presets or rigs, then you could adjust this up here like this and add the rig volume. And that will just adjust the volume of this rig, but not adjust the volume of the overall pedal board. That's a pretty cool thing. And basically, this is the lead guitar for heavy metal in the bridge pickup. And I use this on my Ibanez S guitars with the DiMarzio Evolution pickups. Now, this is preset rig RJM01. And what that means is, again, for 0, which means it's for flash, and 1 means it's my rhythm 1. And this has more of a modern metal sound, more of the new modern amp sound. And you'll see here when I show you the amps, you'll notice the difference of them. Now, the only big difference in this rig is that you can see it's separated. And we'll get to that. Again, the volume control is the same as it's been on the other ones, on the other preset. Now this, I'm using the green JRC pedal. And the first one is actually 12% drive, a 39% tone. And that's all that has on there. And the S1 drive, I have 0 drive, 30 level, and 30% tone. And that's only if I need just a little extra bite. But the big thing is this amp. We'll go to the amp. So this amp is called a 92 tread plate modern. And of course you can see my preset. It's an RJM tread plate R01. And I have cabinet link off. Now, I should explain in some of these presets, I like having the cabinet off because sometimes the amp will have a cabinet that it likes to pair up with. And this allows you to pair up the cabinet you want and not the cab that's linked to this preset or this amp. And basically, I have gain of 16%, 0 precedence, master volumes at 97, trebles at 0, mids are 86%, and the bass is at 100, or 19 rather. The bass is at 1900, or 19. So, and basically, this amp down here is the same exact amp. Now again, remember, the amp on top is going to the left and the amp on the right is going to the bottom. The amp on the bottom is going to the right. Now the CQ, I have it right here, and basically is one is the gain, the other one is the frequency, and the Q1 down there is the frequency 1, and that's its amount of taper, whether it's tapering per decibel at 0.3 or 0.52. So it kind of makes it a wider or a narrower EQ. A very narrow EQ would make it a notch filter. And as you can go down through it, so basically on this pair EQ, I have 0 gain at 6.8. Gain 2, I have 5.2 dB gain at 139.0 hertz and a 0.3 EQ. And I have gain negative 3.9 dB at 753.6 hertz with a Q of 0.7. And gain 4 is minus 3.4 dB at 10,000 hertz. And that's again a Q3. Now, at the bottom, type 1 can be a shelf. You could actually adjust this to make that whatever you wanted. If you brought this back up again, if we bring that, we can make that a shelf. We could make that a dB drop. I like to have it as a shelf because now I know type 1 is a shelf at the bottom and type 4 is a shelf at the top. And that's how we have it. Now, para EQ2 is basically the same thing. So let's go back over the CQ again. 1 is 0 dB at 68. We're kind of making that into a shelf, but there's no drop in that. 2 is 5.2 dB at 139 hertz, a Q3.3. Gain 3 is minus 0.39 dB at 753.6 hertz, Q of 0.7. And we got a minus 3.4 dBQ at 0.03 at 10,000 hertz. And basically, again, we have type 1 pair EQ and the type 4 are actually shelves. So if you notice, we also have the pair EQ in between the amp and the cabinet. So that would just be like taking the effects out of the amp, running it into the EQ, then running it back into the amp, and then back into the cabinet. And here at the cabinets, we're running RJM C30s at 87. So basically we're using a 412 classic 30 watt cabinet and a condenser 87 as the microphone. Go back out of this. Now here's where it really sounds cool when you're running these rhythm rigs. This is the mix. So basically the top amp configuration goes to the left and the bottom amp configuration goes to the right. This mix is where you really get those killer rhythm tones. And here you'll see that I have level 1 is at minus dB, 1.2 dB, and I have A, which would be the top amp, panned all the way minus 100%, which means it's all the way to the left. And then at B, I have it 0 dB, and I have it panned 100%. So that means that this amp configuration here is going to the right, and this amp configuration here is going to the left. But what's really killer about this rig, and I said this in another video, is because I can delay that. Now, that says AB delay 18,010. What that is micro units or microseconds. So basically, when you're looking at that, 18,000 microseconds is basically 18 milliseconds. So if you're in post, we do this all the time when we're doing a track, especially in metal. We take that rhythm track and run it all the way to the left and run another track all the way to the right and put about an 18 to 21 millisecond delay, and it gives you that nice separation. And that's really killer because now you got that nice spread. So the more delay you put on this thing at this point, the more the speakers will spread that sound. In fact, I use this in a lot of my mixes to separate. Sometimes I'll even take the keyboards and increase this to make that spread a little wider. So we'll go to the next out of the mix will be the flanger. Flanger's pretty simple. It's just a 0.34 hertz, a depth of 34, feedback of 34, a pre-delay of 7 milliseconds, and we have it stereo 180 degrees out, and the sync is off. Then the reverb is 48% decay, 100% tone, pre-delay is 0, mix is 12%. In this situation of a rhythm guitar, there's two factors that we want to have in here that are really essential to make the music stand out. And that is a little bit of the top end is cut. You'll see how we cut some of the top end through EQing and in the amp, because we want the growl of the amp, but we don't want that high trebly bite because then it'll interfere with the lead guitar or any other guitars or any other instruments, especially the vocals. We want that rhythm guitar to ride just above that bass and give that nice growl. Now, sometimes, depending on the songs, you can increase that, but I find that this is the way to go. And this is my newer metal sound. Now, if I go to R02, basically, everything is set up the same as you saw in the previous rhythm rig in R01. The only difference is now we're using a 89 SL100 Crunch amp. Now that's the model of the amp. Again, cab link is turned off. And then this is my preset, RJM SL100 Crunch R02. This is going to rhythm 02, which means it's going to rhythm. 0 means flash guitar, and it's the second rhythm. Now this rhythm is basically the same, except I'm using this amp now, and I'm using this amp at preamp is at 61%, presence is at 0. And remember, this is a rhythm track, so we don't want a lot of presence. We want that track to just be underneath the vocals and lead guitar. Master volume's at 100. The treble's at 21, mid's at 89, and the bass is at 18. And of course, the brightness is turned off because we want that sound of that rhythm guitar to stay underneath everything else. And basically, the only thing I changed with this would be, I might have increased the rate of the flanger. So this flanger is at 0.52, depth's at 43, feedback's at minus 43, pre-delay's at 0.7, stereo 180 degrees, syncs off. So if we think back, I think we increased the rate. I think the flanger rate was like 0.35 on the other rhythm track I had. So basically this is the same rig as the other rig, only what I have done is change the amps and I changed the flangers. And again, I can't stress this enough, the one thing I love is see RJM flanger R02. Now this flanger is set up. When you set this preset, of course you go to save that preset, cancel, save new preset, save. What you're doing is you can save that as a preset. So when you think about it, if you're going to use rhythm 1 and rhythm 2 and you had only one rig, you'd have to go down and change that. You'd have to change the flanger settings. With a system like this, you can save that flanger to that preset to that rig. So then that makes it, adaptable. Now that's the same flanger that I'm using in rig 1, but you can see rig 1 was at 0.34 depth and minus 3.4 feedback. But in rig 2, it was at minus 43 feedback, 43 depth, and 0.52 hertz rate, which gives it more of a chorusing effect. So those are both two rhythm rigs. This is guitar rig RJM L0B in its original form with one distortion pedal turned on. This is rig RJM L0B with both distortion pedals turned on. This is rig RJM L0B with the short reverb turned off and the long reverb turned on. This is guitar rig RJM R01, a rhythm rig with one distortion pedal on in its original form. This is RJM R01 with both distortion pedals turned on. This is guitar rig RJM R02. This is the second rhythm rig, and it has one distortion pedal turned on in its original form. This is RJM R02 with both distortion pedals turned on.
So there you have it, the 3 presets I use for heavy metal and rock. I hope you liked them. So take care, my friends, and thanks for watching.